Hey, welcome! Today, we're going to be literary detectives. We're diving into a fascinating puzzle in the book of Genesis, and we're going to see how a story that seems completely bizarre and out of place is actually a secret key to understanding the whole book's genius. So our mystery starts with one of the most famous stories ever told, the story of Joseph and his coat of many colors. But right when the drama gets intense, the narrative hits the brakes hard. I mean, think about it. Joseph has just been betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery in Egypt. The tension is at an all-time high. And then, bam, the camera just cuts away. We suddenly leave Joseph behind to follow his brother Judah into this really scandalous and frankly weird family drama with his daughter-in-law Tamar. It feels so random, right? Like a commercial break at the worst possible moment. Why on earth is this story here? And you know, for the longest time, many scholars basically agreed. They looked at this chapter, Genesis 38, and called it an interpolated story. That's just a fancy way of saying it was probably a story from somewhere else that got clumsily shoved in here, breaking the flow of the main plot. But what if it's not a mistake? What if we're just not reading it with the right set of glasses? What if we need a totally different kind of tool to see what's actually going on beneath the surface? This brings us to a really revolutionary way of looking at these ancient texts.
So, for a long time, the main way to study these texts was to see them as a kind of patchwork quilt, stitched together from a bunch of different sources over time. But then comes this literary approach, really championed by the scholar Robert Alter, who says, hold on, what if it's not a clumsy patchwork? What if we're looking at a masterpiece, a single unified work of art where every single piece, every word, is there for a reason?
This method is called literary narrative criticism, and honestly, it's a game changer. Instead of only asking about history or sources, it focuses on the artistry of the story itself. It encourages us to read the text like we'd read a brilliant novel, to pay super close attention to things like character development, plot twists, and especially the clever, deliberate way the author uses language to create meaning.
As Alter himself puts it, you really can't get the full message of the text unless you appreciate its art. The two are completely connected. In a way, the art is the message.
Okay, so let's pick up that new literary toolkit and go back to Genesis 38. The second we stop seeing it as an interruption and start looking for artistic connections, some absolutely incredible clues start to pop right off the page. And this is where the detective work gets really, really cool. The author creates this incredible echo. Remember, in the Joseph story, the brothers deceive their father Jacob with Joseph's bloody coat, and they say to him, "Recognize this, please." Well, guess what? The exact same unique Hebrew phrase, Haker-na, is what Tamar says to Judah when she reveals her deception. And it doesn't stop there. In both stories, a kid of the goats is the central object used in the deception.
Come on, that cannot be a coincidence. No way. This is brilliant, intentional literary artistry. The narrator is practically screaming at us, linking these two stories together to create this powerful theme. Judah the deceiver is now being deceived himself in an almost identical way.
And the connections go even deeper. The author is playing with themes across these chapters. You have the story of Judah's sexual incontinence, placed right next to the story of Joseph's heroic sexual continence when he resists Potiphar's wife, total opposites. And both stories play with this recurring theme of primogeniture, the rights of the firstborn son being overturned for a younger one. See? This isn't an interruption, it's a deliberately placed mirror designed to make us think. So, we see the literary parallels, but what's the point? Why does it matter to the bigger story? Well, it turns out this random little detour is actually the key to the transformation of one of the Bible's most important characters.
This chapter is, without a doubt, the turning point for Judah. He starts out as the callous brother who comes up with the idea to sell Joseph into slavery just to make a few bucks. But this humiliating showdown with Tamar forces him into a moment of shocking self-awareness. He has to admit, she is more righteous than I. That humbling experience is what changes him. It's the event that transforms him into the man who, much later, will selflessly offer his own life to save his youngest brother, Benjamin.
Seriously, without this story, Judah's later heroism would come out of nowhere. It wouldn't make any sense. Genesis 38 gives us the missing piece of his character arc. It explains how this deeply flawed man is humbled and transformed into someone worthy of leadership, and ultimately into the ancestor of Israel's greatest kings like King David. So, this is all great for Genesis 38, but how can you use this kind of literary detective work yourself when you're reading other stories? Well, it all just comes down to knowing what to look for.
Here's a super simple toolkit you can use. First, listen to the words. When a unique phrase gets repeated, like Haker-na, that's a giant blinking sign from the author. Second, watch the actions. When motifs or images, like the kid of the goats, keep popping up, it's a thematic breadcrumb trail. Third, analyze the dialogue. What characters say, and just as importantly, what they don't say, tells you so much. And finally, notice the narration. When the storyteller suddenly slows way down or speeds through years in a sentence, they are putting a spotlight on what really matters. These are the clues to the author's genius.
At the end of the day, that's all it really is. It's about reading slowly and carefully. In Alter's words, it's about paying minutely discriminating attention to the artful use of language. It sounds complicated, but it just means the genius is right there in the details, just waiting for us to find it. So I want to leave you with a question. The next time you're reading any story and you come across a part that feels weird, that feels out of place, don't just skip over it. Pause and ask yourself, what if this isn't a mistake? What if this so-called interruption is actually the secret key to the entire narrative? You might be completely blown away by what you discover.